Welcome to Edge Industry Review Fireside Chat. I'm Jim Davis, editor of Edge Industry Review. Here today with us is Phil Marangella, Chief Marketing and Product Officer at EdgeConneX, a global provider of sustainable data center solutions. So it is truly no stretch to call EdgeConneX a pioneer in the data center industry, having formed in 2009 and finished its first Edge data center in 2013, well before the Edge became a thing. EQT Infrastructure acquired the company in late 2020. Since then, EdgeConneX has been rapidly building out new international partnerships and adding to its executive roster. We wanted to check in on EdgeConneX to see how the data center market has changed and what might be next for Edge. Phil, welcome.
Jim, thank you. Thanks for having me. Always good to chat with you.
Well, we've certainly had chats over the years, including well before Edge Industry Review. I wanted to ask, to start with, how has the company's positioning evolved over the years? We certainly talked early on about serving network service providers, and then later, now we're seeing, I guess, more of the growth being driven by hyperscaler deployments within your facilities. Maybe you want to chat about some of the sizing of deployments versus, say, some of the other startups that are out in the market that have come after you.
Yeah, good question, Jim. From a positioning, look, fundamentally at the end of the day, what hasn't changed is our focus on the customer and giving them what they want, where they want, when they want. Now, that those kind of form factors have changed, right? Because as we first started out, building out the edge, that was for the network providers, that was for the content providers, because they wanted to get the content closer to the eyeballs, right? For us, kind of phase two, that customer being the cloud guys, was focused on the edge cloud, right? And building out these more distributed architectures closer to the enterprises and focused on cloud on-ramps, because you already had established the kind of network ecosystem at the edge, and so that was what was very attractive to put the cloud on-ramp hubs there, right? But as we engage with the customer, because we don't speculatively build typically our sites, we collaborate with our customers, they like the notion of putting, kind of tailor-made data centers for that anchor customer where they want them, right? And so they asked, well, could you go big? Could you go hyperscale? And so, and again, form factor didn't matter, and we started building out very large hyperscale build-to-suit data centers in Europe to start, in Amsterdam and Dublin, and that carried over back to Chicago and North America, and now we've progressed around the world. And so that's our kind of tagline, that hyper-local to hyperscale and everything in between. You have cable landing stations, you have, are these edge pops that we have, all the way to huge hyperscale campuses that exceed 100 plus megawatts. And it's that continuum of products that I think is really appealing, right? So again, focused on those kind of core customers of network, content, cloud. Now you have gaming, right, with the metaverse type of customer requirements that span the spectrum of both hyperscale and hyperlocal kind of deployments. And then you have IoT, you have the big data requirements, autonomous vehicles, and so forth and so on. And having that continuum has been really important for them. Where you have seen a lot of our focus grow and expand is internationally, right? And you referenced being acquired by EQT. Having them in place as our partner has allowed us to rapidly scale up. So, for example, last year we entered India at the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year we entered China, right? India was through a JV, China through a strategic investment, but both two massive markets, huge population, huge businesses, and so forth, where we want to build out platforms across both markets, right? Both of those countries, supporting those customer requirements, right? And in between that, you layer that in with organic growth into Brussels and Barcelona, and acquisition in Israel, further expansion in South America. So 2021 was certainly a very busy year for us, kind of building out that platform on behalf of our customers and taking them where they need to go to get closer to their customers.
Well, speaking of customers, then, if we look at the enterprise market, what does Edge mean or not mean to enterprise customers here in 2022? What are some of the ongoing challenges for driving adoption? Or maybe what are some ideas you have about the part of the ecosystem that needs attention next?
Yeah. So we don't directly focus on the enterprise customer. Certainly the core EdgeConneX business doesn't. In India, that's different, right? They do and they can. But for EdgeConneX proper, what we focus on are enabling our customers to support the enterprises. And oftentimes we're trying to create this hybrid multi-cloud ecosystem at the edge, right? Because the way we see it is kind of this supply chain and bringing to the enterprise the cloud ecosystem, right? And it's not only the large hyperscaler, but it's the adjacent service providers that sit around it, storage and security and so forth. And then having the kind of MSP SI serve as the wrapper that can help the customer, the enterprise customer, figure out what makes sense, what to keep on-prem, what to put in public cloud, what to put in hybrid, and leveraging our kind of proximate ecosystem to tap into the best of breed service providers that are local. Because at the end of the day, not only the performance is improved when you bring the cloud closer, cost is greatly reduced for the service provider, right? In terms of it's kind of that local access rather than bringing it all the way from the core to the edge and back and forth. Having their proximate and bringing the compute local is hugely advantageous. Having that ecosystem then and there is also the ease and simplicity, right? And then the MSP kind of helps the customer figure out. That's one of the big challenges is, which workload for which cloud, and having that flexibility to switch workloads and have choices between which clouds you use and so forth. And I think that's what's top of mind. As I think the pandemic showed, a lot of companies just accelerated their digital transformation. They took that opportunity to kind of accelerate what they're putting in the cloud and how they're going to the cloud and so forth. And so we saw a huge upsurge in demand at the edge for more compute, more network, right? More capabilities to support those customers, because at the end of the day, those enterprise customers, at the end of the day, then we all became working from home, right? And at the same time, as you're working from home, your kids are studying from home and you're streaming from home more than ever, and it creates these bottlenecks at the edge. And so, having these edge data centers really helped alleviate those bottlenecks and allowed us kind of to have the business continuity, right? And we were able to function relatively normally, even though we're all working at home so much and spending so much time at home. That's the value that the data centers industry and the data centers and the data center ecosystem helped kind of get us through this whole pandemic and still remain productive and effective as businesses.
It's almost like you thought about building out for that kind of situation.
Well, yeah, we didn't, but it was fortunate that we were there and we had it set up. Which reminds me, that exact term is often used in reference to our DSEM platform, right? So it allows us to manage our entire data center platform remotely, and we did that originally at the edge because our sites were unmanned, right? And for economic reasons, it just made sense when you start staffing it, it really jacks the price up when you have a 2 megawatt, say, data center. And so we built it for economic and efficiency reasons. And then come COVID, when you couldn't travel, you couldn't get to the data center, and customers want to, check on their infrastructure and their gear, they were able to do that remotely. And that was immensely helpful, again, during the pandemic. We didn't think about a pandemic, but it came to be extremely beneficial that we had that in place as well.
Well, so we chatted a little bit about engaging in partnerships for international growth. Maybe just a brief look. What are the build-outs going to look like in terms of location and capacity? I don't know if we could say China and India are going to look the same.
No.
Certainly there are some dense population centers, but are you going to be starting to build there versus some, again, more edge locations outside of those core data center markets? And how big are those facilities going to be?
Yeah, Jim, good question. I think we're going to flip the model a little bit. Let's start with India first, right? So we want to build out a national platform at data centers. We announced that we intend to build out, a gigawatt, by 2030, a data center platform, which is different from how we started at EdgeConneX, where we started at the edge and then we started building out the traditional core markets in large footprint. There, you'll start out in big data centers to support hyperscale requirements. And so we're going to Chennai, we're going to Navi Mumbai and Noida, in some of the major markets in India, because there, unlike, would say, when we started in the U.S., where Ashburn, which is where I live, was already well saturated and highly competitive, and there was a lot of capacity in Silicon Valley, and the traditional U.S. markets had plenty of supply and plenty of competition. In India, there's still, although there are some competitors and so forth, there's still a huge opportunity to bring new data centers with not only reliable power, but in the case of India, renewable power. And that's why we picked our partner with the Adani Group, because they are one of the largest solar manufacturers and producers in India, right? And that will be able to support our data center facilities there. So you're kind of leapfrogging from an innovation and power perspective by having these integrated data centers that have renewable energy supporting them and so forth. And you build that out into the core markets. Eventually, India, like even the edge, is massive, right? You're talking millions of people at some of these edge markets and so forth. So it's an interesting dynamic. But there's just so much to be done in India alone. And that's just one market. Then the same is true for China, right? Even bigger, right? And obviously we're starting out in the Beijing metro area. It's in Tianjin, which is part of the conserve Beijing, and then same down in Shanghai initially, and then we can kind of scale out from there as well. But these are two ginormous countries, underserved, with reliable data centers, reliable power, and a robust ecosystem. And it's part of that global platform, that global edge that we're kind of building out to serve for our customers as the cloud guys continue to scale out, and the rest of the service provider community go beyond North America, beyond Western Europe, and so forth, to support a lot of these emerging markets around the world.
Well, your point about the partnership in India is really interesting, because my next question was going to be about the challenge that not just the data center industry in general, but edge data centers also face challenges, not just in terms of balancing location and power, but getting power to remoter locations for all of that compute and storage and networking equipment is a big challenge. So how do we as an industry do something in a sustainable fashion? Maybe you can talk a little bit about sustainability initiatives and let us know what's up for you this year in that regard.
Yeah, look, sustainability is fundamental for us. Again, acquired by EQT, a Swedish-based company. It's obviously fundamental to them. So we're like-minded in terms of our mindset around sustainability. We look at sustainability holistically, so it's not just the power aspect, but it's water, right? It's materials, it's people, right? We're going to follow the UN's guidelines in terms of how we benchmark ourselves and how we track and report how truly sustainable we are as a company. Again, the India use case is a great one, though, right? Because we're not just ticking the box and saying, hey, I'm going to use renewable energy credits to kind of offset what we're doing from a data center power usage perspective. We're actually going to source direct renewable energy to power our facilities and so forth. We're looking at the water usage and how to use dirty water to come through, and that gets filtered, and then what we put back out is clean water and so forth. So there's a lot of technology innovations. There's a lot of sourcing of green and responsible means to kind of operate our data center facilities, and then replicating that around the world. Every kind of country or region is different and has its challenges, but the mindset, we have this mantra customer, people, planet, right? That's kind of how we think about things. If you take care of your customers, if you take care of the people at our company who are taking care of those customers, and you take care of the planet, then everything else should take care of itself. It sounds simple and a little bit trite, but it is. If you got to go keep it that simple and focused, and that's how we're going about things. I will say this too, Jim, and maybe you can talk to it, is what I think is great as an industry, though, is it's extremely collaborative and inclusive in terms of what each company is doing individually, but how we as an industry are collectively trying to solve for the sustainability question, right? We recognize that it's a huge part of our business, and there's tremendous sharing. There's a lot of organizations, whether it's the Infrastructure Masons or the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact, or there's others where we're all collaborating, right? Large hyperscale service providers, operators like ourselves, and a lot of the guys in the supply chain, right, that are building the equipment and gear, are all collaborating and sharing on innovations and methods to improve our efficiency and so forth. Because there is a bit of a backlash and kind of bad press around it, probably unfairly so. So we're trying to get ahead of that, and educate people on exactly what we're doing as an industry, and reminding them, in spite of the tremendous growth in the volume and data and applications and things that everybody are doing on the internet, the power and the efficiency is at kind of at this level, right? So the delta is growing, so demonstrating the huge efficiencies that how we operate these things in spite of the tremendous data growth and data use that's taking place.
Yeah, I think for the most part, the industry has done a really good job of sourcing sustainable energy and being advanced in that regard. The whole edge computing question is very interesting, because one of the advantages would be to keep data local, and we'll process it locally, right? But on the other hand, at the moment, some of the processors that we use to do all of that information crunching aren't necessarily, the most efficient, but there's a lot of advancements going on at the chip level as well to bring to market edge AI specific chip designs that will use less power, generate less heat, and, kind of, again, balance out that increased locality and power consumption, and hopefully, keep us at least somewhat in balance. Well, so speaking of edge, how edge is edge now. One of the other developments here in kind of your home market is looking at what's happening with tower companies like American that are making acquisitions and strategic partnerships in the edge data center space. What's your view of what's happening in the North America market?
Yeah, Jim, another good question. It's interesting. Look, it's at the end of the day, again, it's the infrastructure supply chain of delivering the data, right, to the end users, and be it towers, be it data centers, be it networks, and so forth. It really comes down to that end-to-end kind of offering, and so I think you'll see more consolidation in the business, amongst data centers acquiring other data centers and so forth. You will see probably data centers going the other way and maybe acquire some towers. Fiber assets and so forth can come into bear and what have you. But it comes down, look, at the end of the day, the quality of service and the quality of experience. And if you can provide that kind of one throat to choke and support customers in that regard, then it makes sense, right? Much in the same way, whereas we're trying to be, we could build massive data center campuses all the way to kind of edge pops and everything in between. It's making it easier and simpler for the customer. They can come to us and they know the spectrum of offerings that we can offer is what's appealing. And again, it's a crowded and highly competitive landscape, but we're all building out at at max scale right now, right? Again, I live in Ashburn, and I drive through the gauntlet of data centers every day, and it's still, there's a ton of building being done, and stuff's being absorbed in massive chunks, like 30, 50, 80 megawatts at a time. It's insane. And you already have well over, gigawatt, 2 gigawatts in Ashburn, right? And so look, again, I always go back. It's the volume of data. It's the velocity of data, so the speed that we need to, low latency and the support, right? That's driving the edge. And it's the variety of data. And I mentioned it during the pandemic, right? And you've got all these different applications and use cases that are putting this burden on the underlying infrastructure to ensure that wherever you are, whether you're gaming in real time, whether you're in the metaverse, whether you're on a streaming call, and simultaneously streaming Netflix, or you're on your Peloton or whatever, these are all putting massive burdens on the underlying infrastructure. And also you layer in TikTok and all these kind of things, right? Because traditionally it's always been unidirectional, download centric, and now it's becoming multi-directional, and there's so much traffic that's being created at the edge, staying at the edge, going to other edges or back to the core, and vice versa. And that's the role of this kind of more distributed architecture. Doesn't mean Ashburn goes away by any means. You still need those major hubs, but it's these smaller edge hubs that are going to proliferate, right? Like the markets that we established, as you said, back in 2013, Portland and Las Vegas and Denver and so forth, they're becoming big markets. Portland's huge right now, right? And you have Seattle right there in Silicon Valley, but Portland in itself, because it's a gateway to the West and to Asia, and in its own right, it's becoming a huge hub. Low cost power there as well, and hydroelectric and all that kind of stuff. But there's tremendous demand in Portland, and you're seeing a lot of these tier 2 markets, Miami. You go down the list, Detroit, right? Like these are becoming big data center hubs in their own right. It's great to be a part of this business, right? It's one sector that there is just, across the board, I think we're all kind of building out as fast as we can, which could be a good segue to your next, perhaps, question around supply chain. Right?
You did it for me. I think a lot of that is the outlook for 2022. I don't know if there are any other key markets or trends that are going to drive business growth for you in particular. I mean, you have bets across a lot of different places, so sounds like an exciting year ahead for you.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a crazy year last year, and we're not stopping this year. You'll see us continue to add dots in Asia, continue to add dots in EMEA, and I know we've already added some dots in LATAM that we haven't yet announced and so forth. So continue hyper growth. But again, the supply chain, this often comes up, Jim, right? We're all growing, we're all building out. We're all trying to solve for the supply chain issues, and that's elongating the time it takes to build these things. So you try to plan ahead, you try to stockpile, certain equipment and generators and the usual stuff to build to mitigate for any potential delays. But we're all, I think we're all facing the same challenges as kind of we build out, this year and beyond, from a supply chain perspective.
So really, in a sense, there's some external gating factors on growth as opposed to any capital issues or trends in and of themselves.
Right.
Well, excellent, Phil. Thanks. It's always great to talk to you, and appreciate you coming on the show.
Likewise, Jim. Great to catch up.